Hi, this is Dan Bullard sitting out on my front deck of my houseboat again. It's the end of the day and the sun's going down. It's getting cold, so but I thought, I've been digging through this stuff and I've found some interesting stuff. First of all, though, I want to mention Circuit Digest. I've been trying Circuit Digest, trying to log into Circuit Digest every day, and they're not letting me in. They don't want me confronting them on the ridiculously bad crap that they've got on this harmonics thing. So, I guess you can't blame them, to be shown up by a guy without a degree. But I got pretty good at this mixed signal stuff, and it just got better and better as time went on. Now, TCFTest was in response to a guy who asked me what's the roll-off of the Telecom filter, which was an option on the STS 3000. And I didn't know. And I asked some of the guys, and the guys in Boston were just as unhelpful as you can imagine. They probably didn't like me because I replaced a guy named Ziegler, who was a contractor, and he wanted to get paid for what he was doing, what he was going to do. And so I took his place, and I was out on the West Coast, and they thought that was unfair because, the East Coast does mixed signal, the West Coast does digital. Well, screw that, So I didn't get any help from the guys in Boston. I had to learn all this stuff on my own. Nobody knew mixed signal that I knew, and the guys in Boston weren't talking. So I had to learn it on my own. So nobody would give me anything about the Telecom filter. And so I had to write a program myself. And so what I did was I wrote a program in Pascal, and I decided I was going to do 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, 5 kilohertz, and so on, all the way up to, I think, 24 kilohertz. I think in my other video I said 23, but it's actually 24. So I generated all these waveforms in time domain, and I realized that was stupid. That was incredibly stupid. So what I did was I changed over to frequency domain. And so now I could do it in frequency domain, so specify the amplitudes in frequency domain from 1 kilohertz to 24 kilohertz in 1 kilohertz steps. And then the problem with that is you end up with an impulse. And as we know, an impulse has a very terrible peak to RMS ratio. Very, very bad. And so it has a very tall peak with not much RMS energy. So what I did, I used a trick that some guys were talking about. I'd never tried it, so I tried it, and it worked great. I was an expert at random number generators. For the most obscure reasons, back when I was a GenRed, I read a book about random number generators and just stuff, math stuff in general. And I wasn't very good at math, and I needed to get up to speed on math if I was going to do this stuff. So in there was a thing on random number generators, and so to test it, I wrote a program to duplicate the California lottery. That saved me a ton of money because I wrote a program that I could run from a terminal at home. I had a VT100 at home. We could dial in, and my wife could play the lottery game, and she would lose again and again and again, and so it saved me a ton of money. She never ever played the lottery after that. But I also wrote a program called Slots, which was a slot machine program, and that used a random number generator, and so I got really good at dealing with random number generators. So I wrote my own random number generator to randomize the phases of all these waveforms. So I generated the amplitude, constant amplitude across all frequencies, but I varied the phase with this random number generator, and it worked great. And so here is what I've got right away with random number generator determining the phases. This is the 1 through 24 kilohertz waveform with the phases all randomized. Now, as I mentioned, I sent that out to the tester, and I got a terrible result. I captured it, and here it is captured, and you can see that it's missing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of like roll-off that happens in there, and that's because I intentionally programmed the waveform generator, the arbitrary waveform generator on the STS-3000 to roll off at around 20 kilohertz. And I did that intentionally to kind of prove this theory that I was, I'm going to get rid of everything above 20 kilohertz, but I'm going to roll it off slowly. So I look at the spectrum, and you can see it rolling off, and it's rolling off around 24 kilohertz, something like that. I did a little thing. It was kind of fun. I was showing this off to a salesman. He was like a really great guy, Chuck Everhart. And Chuck Everhart, he was brilliant, man, brilliant. He was a co-founder of a company that did mixed signal testing. So he was a guy to talk to and stuff. Like I said, my boss Stephanie didn't care a lick about test. She was only interested in getting ahead in the operation. So I showed this stuff to Chuck, and I was just showing him in the beginning, showing all the stuff, and he says, well, it's too bad you can't connect all those things together. And I said, oh, well, hey, Chuck, check this out. I flipped a variable, and boom, I got this plot. So what it did was, it just did a decimation. So it went, I forget what the M was. I think it might have used an M of 21, but I used an M of 21, and so I just took every 21st point in the spectrum, basically deleted everything that wasn't in 24, 21, or 42, or 63, or whatever, and it gave me this beautiful plot. And Chuck was like, just astounded. Chuck was a guy, I was really kissing up to Chuck. He was a great guy, but he was also a pilot. He lived in the Sierra Nevadas, but he worked in San Jose, and so what he would do every day, he lived on an airport up in the Sierras. He and 3 other people would fly to San Jose every day, and they would go to work, and then at the end of the day, they'd go get in the plane and take off from San Jose International and fly out and go back home, and that was his day. In fact, I remember very clearly, there was a big meeting, all heads meeting, and all these guys were there, and the CEO of Credence says, Chuck, it's 4 o'clock. You better get out of here. Can you imagine being in a meeting at 4 o'clock and your boss, the CEO, telling you, time for you to go home. We don't want you to have a problem. So they loved Chuck, and everybody loved Chuck. He was a great guy. Unfortunately, Chuck had get-home-itis occasionally. And one time he was flying back from San Jose back home in a rainstorm, and he got confused or something and crashed into a mountain, and that killed him. So him and just one other person was with him. They crashed into this mountain, and that was the end of Chuck. So all that work I put into impressing Chuck didn't go anywhere. But it was still worth the effort, because guess what I've got? I've got the plots of all the stuff I did for Chuck. This is the uncalibrated TCFTest spectrum. Now, calibrate it. How do you calibrate it? What I did was, I took that uncalibrated wave, or spectrum, and I took the roll-off, and I inverted it. I basically took the reciprocal. Now, you got to be careful, because stuff at the Nyquist bin is like, you don't know what amplitude that's going to be. And so I always zero that out. You got to be careful, because when you zero it out and you flip it over, you take the inverse. Man, what's the inverse of 0? It's a lot. It's a big number. So I always made sure to get rid of that. I learned a lot of stuff about math and stuff. So here's the calibrated spectrum, and it came out absolutely flat. I mean, absolutely flat. Now, I've got a calibrated spectrum. I've got a waveform that's calibrated, and I can shoot it off to the Telecom filter and see what happens. So I click in the Telecom filter, because I was just doing this in the bypass mode, going around the Telecom filter. I send it through the Telecom filter with it programmed in a low pass cutoff mode at 5 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz. And here it is, roll off at 10 kilohertz. That is sweet. But even better, like I said, I did this for Chuck. I got the 10 kilohertz roll off in a decimation. Remember, I decimated the spectrum, so I took the 21st and the 42nd and the 63rd and the whatever, 84th, whatever it is. So I took those bins and I showed just those. So I got that beautiful, beautiful spectrum without looking at all the noise. I don't have to look at the noise. Okay, so that was the low pass filter. Then I tried, there's a band pass, and I tried it with a low pass cutoff of 10 kilohertz and a high pass cutoff of 5 kilohertz. And then here's the checkified spectrum, the decimated spectrum, and it's so beautiful, so beautiful. This was my training course. This was part of my training course for the SCS 3000. So I showed the students the code for this, and it was in their books, and so they could take notes on it while I was going through it and showing it to them. I won't show you the Pascal because it's Pascal, you know. It's lovely code. I love Pascal, but it's not relevant anymore. Nobody uses it. Here's bandpass 2 with a low pass cutoff of 10 kilohertz and a high pass cutoff of 5 kilohertz, and that is a beautiful, beautiful picture. The decimated spectrum, it comes out so beautiful. It comes out so nice. So yeah, Chuck was impressed with that. He was a great guy, and I really wish he'd lived so he could see this, but he didn't. We lost 2 people due to flying accidents at Credence. We lost Chuck, and we lost the CEO. He was a great guy. Dave Mees, he was a great guy. And the day I showed up, I came to work, and the girls at the front office were crying. They were in tears because they'd heard about Dave dying in a plane crash. He had flown up, him and a friend and a girlfriend had flown up to Alaska. They were coming back. They stopped off in the San Juans to get fuel, and they took off again, and they were too low, and they hit a tree, and so the girls at the front desk were crying, and I couldn't convince them to go home or something. I said, "Look, I'll take over for you. You know, you guys got to get off the phone like this. You can't be at the front desk and you can't be crying and stuff." So, but they were really broken up, but they weren't going to leave their post. So the whole company was pretty upset. And as I mentioned in another video, I was teaching a class to a bunch of Chinese guys, and they were from actually Red China, and I had to continue teaching the class even though they were holding the funeral for Dave Mees, and I had to stay there. But you know what? They scheduled the funeral for the day of an eclipse, and so there was a solar eclipse that day, and so the funeral was held during the eclipse, and it was, God, let me go that way. Let me go now. That's the way I want to go. Anyway, that's TCFTest, and that was an example program that I used to teach people how to do this stuff. And people loved that program. They were crazy about it because it showed how to do all this stuff in frequency domain. You could do stupid shit in time domain, but doing it in frequency domain is the smart way to go, the really, really smart way to go. And that's where I got the inspiration for doing the next thing, which was periodic white noise. So it was really fun. I've done a lot of really cool things in mixed signal and DSP and all that stuff. So you can do some amazing stuff, and you just got to put your mind to it, think about it. You don't need to know the math. I mean, I didn't know the math at all. I learned the math through doing this stuff, and that's the way, in my mind, that's the way you do it. If the math doesn't apply to anything, I can care less. I could really care less. Complex math, I can do it. I can do it no problem. I just don't like talking about it because I don't know all the terms, you know, all the terminology and the, oh God, complex conjugate and all that crap. I don't know what that is, you know. But I don't need to know. I can try it on the tester and see what it looks like. And if they had left me a tester, if Apple Toast had left me a tester to work on, I could have done a lot more, but now it's too late. I can't see well enough to go in there and fiddle with it, and you know, you're lucky I can even see this. So I'm getting near the end here with this, you know, reading this stuff and doing this stuff. Videos where I just talk, you don't want to see that. Anyway, it's a beautiful day. It's the end of the day. I'm going to go have dinner, so you guys take it easy. There's a Dan Bullard from the river. See ya.